Most of what we do in instrumental teaching has very little to do with how young children actually learn. If it's frustrating and abstract, the brain doesn't benefit much. Music notation is one of the most abstract symbol systems that we have. And of course that doesn't work for most 4-year-olds or even 5-year-olds. It's simply about development. But what if there is another way? Last Sunday at a playdate, my friend asked me the one question I probably get the most when it comes to music lessons for young children. She said, "We've got Leo, that kid's piano that you recommended us for Christmas, and he's been obsessed with it since. So I called the music school to ask for piano lessons. But they said he was too young, and we've got to wait until he's 6. Leo's 4. And he was really sad. What do you think, Janine? Is he really too young?" The answer could be so simple. As a mom to a 4-year-old myself, I know this feeling. Your child is clearly drawn to an instrument. The motivation is right there, like all day, every day. And then someone tells you, no, not yet. That's frustrating. But as a music teacher, I understand the other side too. Here's the thing. The music school wasn't entirely wrong. Traditional music lessons, instrumental lessons, are designed in a very specific way. Leo would have to sit still for at least 30 minutes. He'd have to focus on black and white keys and stare at black and white symbols that don't mean anything to him yet. He'd have to count out rhythms, almost mechanically, and try to coordinate his fingers with what's on the page while listening to whether what he does sounds right. And of course that doesn't work for most 4-year-olds or even 5-year-olds. It's not even about talent, and it's certainly not about effort. It's simply about development. You know, children in this age group are in what developmental psychologists call the pre-operational stage. They think concretely. They learn through doing, through movement, and through their senses. What they can't do reliably, though, at this age, is process highly abstract symbol systems, what musical notation basically is. Standard music notation, those black and white dots, sometimes with lines, sometimes without, sometimes hollow, sometimes filled, sometimes with another dot. You know where I'm getting at. Those symbols, even like in the simplest way possible, still is too much and too abstract. Music notation is one of the most abstract symbol systems that we have. There's nothing about the shape of a quarter note that tells you what it sounds like. You've got to learn the code. And for a child under the age of 7, that code is hard to crack, even for an adult. So the music school's got a point. Leo is too young for traditional music lessons. But let me challenge that thought for a second. What if the real question shouldn't be whether Leo is ready? What if instead it should be, how can we, as music educators, be ready for Leo? I've been teaching music to children for over 13 years. And for most of that time, I worked exactly the way I was trained. And from the outside, it looked like it was working. But during the lesson, it often felt harder than it should be. I had to constantly push, constantly correct, and constantly find ways to keep my little students engaged. And I didn't see another way because this was the way. That only changed when I became a mother. Because while I was pregnant for the first time, I really wanted to know how those little brains work. So for the first time, I started actually researching about how children learn. Not in music, just in general, for me, to help me out and becoming a mom. So I looked into developmental psychology, neuroscience. It also helps that I have a lot of friends in that field. Thank you. And that led me into approaches like Montessori and Reggio Emilia and play-based learning. And then I had this realization. Most of what we do in instrumental teaching has very little to do with how young children actually learn. We ask them to sit still, when in reality, they gotta move. We hand them abstract notation when they think and learn better in images and colors. We correct every little mistake when research shows that children learn way better when they can discover and correct their own errors. And that means self-directed learning, a prepared environment, the teacher as a guide, and developmentally appropriate tools. And what's funny is, those aren't even radical ideas. To me, they were back then, to be honest, but they are not. They're already well-established principles all around the world. It's just that music education hasn't really caught up with that much. Yet. So, after I came out of my rabbit hole, I started changing things. Small things, at first, in my own lessons. I designed music theory activities. I got my students off of the piano bench. And then, a little girl named Elsa and her love for rainbow colors led me to spontaneously color in her sheet music in rainbow colors. And I could have never imagined how much of a difference these small changes would make. Doot doot. Because only 3 days later, Elsa's mom sent me a message asking what on earth I had done. Elsa wouldn't get off the piano. She was composing her own songs in rainbow colors and giving concerts to her family for breakfast and dinner. One lesson, that's all it took. And what struck me during the next lesson with her wasn't just that Elsa had been playing way more during the week, though that's great already. It was how she was playing. She was listening to herself, noticing when something sounded wrong, going back and fixing it herself without me. She was 4. Did I tell you that? She was 4. She was 4 and she was teaching herself. A couple of years later, we moved countries and I started working at a music school in Switzerland, building their early years program because they didn't have one yet. And again, teaching piano to mostly young students. The approach that I had been developing back in Germany kept working, so of course I used it. And one day, the director called me in. Did I do something wrong? A mother had written a long email saying how relieved she was that her 6-year-old son loved his piano lessons. She had been unsure whether her child was too young for piano lessons, but she said that the way he was learning, with colors, with activities, with this more playful approach, not only helped him learn songs pretty quickly, but it gave him confidence and it made him genuinely happy. So the director said, Jenny, I don't know what you're doing, but how about you teach the other teachers how to do it too? And that's when I realized I wasn't the only one struggling with this. Music teachers everywhere were. Entire music schools were. Because what I also learned in that conversation with him, with the music school director, was that I was the only one who never had dropouts. My students stayed with me. And that was something that I had in the back of my mind, thought about here and there when I saw my colleagues, also back in Germany with the other music schools. My students never quit, especially not my younger students. Turns out that dropouts were in fact a real problem. A big problem. Dropouts that, to me, didn't make sense. Something else that he was struggling with, that he told me that day, was that parents, like my friend, asking for children to start earlier, but he could only send them to me, or to early childhood music classes, the ones that we established. But there was this gap for children who wanted to learn an actual instrument, mostly the piano, and the lesson themselves, because those lessons weren't ready yet. The teachers didn't have the tools. Most of the teachers, like I was back then, were simply overwhelmed with how to teach little students. What they had learned in university didn't really close that gap. So the music school was struggling, the music teachers were struggling, not because they weren't good teachers. They were great teachers. They were struggling because no one ever showed them how to work with this age group. And that's why this music school director didn't need yet another piano book. He needed a new system. Let me take you one layer deeper now, because the research behind all of this is genuinely fascinating to me, and it explains why this play-based approach works so well. Between the ages of 4 and 7, something remarkable is happening in a child's brain. The auditory cortex, that's the part of the brain that processes sound, is still actively maturing. Duh, it's a child. And research by neuroscientists like Skoe, I think, and Nina Kraus, Erika? Are they both German? I don't know. Correct me, please. Let's say Nina Kraus, has shown that during those years, these early years, the brain's response to sound is at its most plastic. It's literally being shaped by what the child hears and does with sound. This means these years aren't just okay or good for music. They are a window where the musical experiences have a disproportionate impact on how the brain develops. But the kind of experience matters enormously. If it's frustrating and abstract and disconnected from how the child thinks, the brain doesn't benefit much. However, if it's playful, embodied, and connected to real musical understanding, the impact is significant. And this connects directly to what we know about self-motivation, self-determination theory, one of the most extensively researched, I think, topics, frameworks in psychology. And it shows that lasting motivation depends on three things: feeling competent, feeling autonomous, and feeling connected. When children experience early success in music, when they can notice and correct their own mistakes, and when they feel supported rather than pressured, motivation takes care of itself. And that was exactly what my students were showing me. They weren't practicing harder. They weren't practicing because someone made them. They were playing because it felt good. But when those conditions aren't met, when the material is too abstract, the approach too teacher-directed, when there's no room for play and true creative expression, motivation collapses. And that's where frustration happens. And I think what dropouts start, not because the child wasn't talented, not because they weren't motivated, but because the system wasn't catered to the child. Now the question is, what does a child's musical journey actually need in the beginning? I believe that during those beautiful early years, the most valuable thing that music education can do is to not only teach them an instrument, but to build the inner musical world that the instrument will later live inside. That means, for instance, building a genuine sense for pulse and rhythm, not by counting out mechanically, but by feeling it in the body. Through movement, through games, through clapping with the hands and stepping with their feet, and maybe even dancing. It also means training the ear. Can they hear whether a note is higher or lower? Can they feel when a melody sounds unfinished or when it arrives? It's fascinating how remarkably fast those kind of skills develop at this age when it's nurtured. And of course, it also means connecting sounds to symbols, but not in a standard notation. Not yet. Instead, you could use colors like I do. Another research by Serkan Demirel has shown that a color-based approach, so moving from colors to colored standard notation and then slowly fading out the colors, is highly effective for preschool-aged children. The colors are a bridge, not a crutch. They simply meet the child where their brain is actually at, and then they are designed to later disappear. What I find genuinely funny is that 5 years ago, without knowing about this research, I made the exact same decision when I created play-based music. If you are new here, play-based music is a method that I created. It's a whole structured pathway for children who want to learn an instrument, like the piano. It connects early childhood music education directly into instrumental teaching, through play, through colors, and also especially through self-directed learning, all the way into traditional music theory itself. And now it has become a program that helps music educators and music schools do the same. So what does this mean for you? If you are, like me and my friend, a parent of a young child, and your child wants to learn an instrument, don't panic, don't rush, but also don't let anyone tell you that your child is too young to learn an instrument. And especially, never let anyone tell you that your child is not musical enough, please. However, before you enroll them in any music lesson, ask the music school this one question. How does your early music program connect to instrumental lessons? If they have a clear answer, that's a good sign. But if the early program and the instrumental lesson feel like two separate worlds, that tells you something too. Because unfortunately, the gap between those worlds is where most children get lost. Not because they lack talent, but because the bridge hasn't been built yet. And if you're a music teacher, fellow colleague, think about how your music students experience their first months with you. Do they feel competent? Yes. Even very young children can and should feel competent. Do they have moments where they discover mistakes themselves? Do they have fun? Like actual fun? Those three things are pretty clear indicators for you. If you still need help with that, this channel is for you. Everything here is open for you to explore. Lesson ideas, rainbow songs, and more nerdy videos like this one. And if you're running a music school and you are seeing the limits of your current structure, then this is my playing field. That's where I come in. There's a link down below where you can book a call, have a conversation, have a chat, so we can talk about your school, your team, your challenges, what's already working and what maybe not, and build a bridge together. So if you've got any questions, suggestions, or simply words of kindness, leave them in the comments down below. I'm happy to chat with you. Bye!